So science is an evolving process. As such, the books that are in our field get updated somewhat regularly. But on top of this process is the tendency for us to stick to kind of what we're used to. This idea of reinforcement, that is your instructors, different programs that kind of stick to one thing. And really a lot of behavior analysis is contacted through one particular book. These are some that I've accumulated over the years. And one in particular, this one, Applied Behavior Analysis by Cooper, Heron, and Heward, is usually the staple of our field and what's being talked about. Not that these other aren't in different locations. This is one people usually jump towards. And I adore this book. There's an entire video that I have on it with the new 3rd edition that came out. But one of the most comprehensive resources for behavior analysis isn't typical reading. In fact, while a lot of people are reading little bits throughout this each week to go through their master's training, it's actually the APA Handbooks of Psychology, the series, in particular the APA Handbook of Behavior Analysis, the 2-volume series that I would say is the most comprehensive go-to resource for behavior analysis right now. And so the question becomes why? Why are these not the staple things that people are learning from? Well, first of all, the price tag. This, when it launched, was a pricey $400 for the 2 of these. When you think about the amount of information, the time and dedication it would take, when I show you a little bit in the table of contents and what's covered, it's just gonna like you might see why, but that is still an extremely pricey tag to be able to understand behavior analysis and learn some about behavioral science. And I've mentioned that I adjunct faculty teach. You know, if I was using this as a professor, I would feel some serious pressure to be able to understand everything that is going on in our field. So I question if it's just not typical standard practice because, well, these are the experts in the different areas talking a chapter on what they've been studying their entire life and what they've come to understand from it. And so I would be nervous to teach from this and feel some serious pressure and maybe the need to go sign up for a doc program just to make sure I was fluent in all this sort of stuff. But in all seriousness, it's just not the typical learning trajectory for most in our field to run across this. And that's really sad. So I wanted to just today put it on your radar, give you an idea, a taste of what's inside of there. So maybe you can consider throwing it on a list at some point and snagging it. So as I mentioned, there are 2 different volumes. The first one here being Methods and Principles. If I crack this open, then we'll just peek at some of what's talked about in here. So an overview. Talking about single case research methods, what makes behavior analysis unique in the way that we understand individual level behavior change, and setting out kind of the boundaries of our field, talking about experimental analysis behavior, translational research, and what applied behavior analysis is. That is the applied science that's being taught in different institutions. From there, single case research designs, that is how we can work on an individual level, one-on-one with somebody, and actually know with scientific certainty what's going on. The methods are actually talked about. Different single case experiment designs, but how we observe, measure, take into account things like generalization, and be able to visually analyze and quantitatively describe what's going on are all described. And then the third part of the first volume is the experimental analysis behavior in depth, talking about Pavlovian conditioning, things that I've kind of talked about on this channel before, and some really big things that we've actually come to understand through our science, such as remembering, forgetting, logic and illogic of human reasoning, self-control, altruism, integrations with behavioral neuroscience, allocation of operant behavior, that is why we engage in certain amounts of behavior and not other amounts of behavior in other places, how our behavior allocates over time, and even a little bit of behavioral pharmacology. So you can see here, there's an extensive, really breadth of what you can contact as a result of just that first volume alone. Now, if we hop over to the second volume here, for this one, they're talking about translating principles into practice. Now, while these are both technical, this one's meant to translate this into practice. So if we were to look a little bit more here, translating principles into practice starts with just the translational research. That is, how do we take this research, bring it into clinical therapy, and how we can start using these in different areas, such as behavioral neuroscience, quantitative choice models, looking at behavioral economics, environmental health, pro-social behavior, working collectively in groups to better the world in some sort of way. And it continues into a lot of different facets that our field has come to be known for helping out and providing solutions for, such as treatment of intellectual and developmental disabilities, treatment of autism, analysis of verbal behavior, therapeutic applications, how to understand things that are, when it comes to talk therapies and different mental behavioral health sort of treatments, understanding and treating ADHD, teaching reading, behavioral account of sleep, Acceptance and commitment therapy, that third wave behavioral therapy. I've created a few videos on this channel. You can learn more about that elsewhere. Substance abuse disorders, behavioral approach to business and industrial problems, and contributions to higher education and behavioral gerontology. And so you can see that these have a wealth of information. The question becomes, how do you even start consuming this? Me in particular, I read a chapter now and then. I do not read these start to finish. If I was in a grad program, perhaps I'd have the pressure to do so, but I slow read these because they're very dense. There's a lot of information in there. On top of that, I use them as a reference when I'm creating different episodes for this channel, for the podcast, Why We Do What We Do, that we run. We're talking about consumable psychology and how to translate and make psychology concepts really easy to understand. This is frequently one of my go-to references. It's very useful. It's missing the last couple of years of research, but it catches me up to date with what's been done for over 60, 80, 100 years in many cases. Now, I mentioned the price tag. I think this was around $400. The 2 books, $200 a piece. It's crazy. I was fortunate to have it gifted to me as like a parting present as part of a company that I worked for and helped start and formulate, essentially providing behavioral services. So I didn't fork out that cash myself, but I damn near cried when I saw these because I knew that I was not going to be able to put them on my list anytime soon. So I've seen typically organizations will buy these and they'll have a copy sitting at the organization because it's a lot easier to justify that sort of expense, make it accessible to all your practitioners, but not have to fork out the money yourself or fork it out for everybody that's out there that's in your organization. So might be something you can do there. Maybe get an institutional copy for your organization. But these are a gem, and it's not that they're better, they're just different than everything else that I threw up here. There's different versions. If you want one that's really comprehensive and up to date as of 2014 or so, this is your go-to for all things behavior analysis. So I hope you found this useful. I'm Ryan O. This is the Daily BA. Subscribe if you aren't, like, share, comment. It really makes the channel grow, it helps me out. And if you're into it, check out Patreon. It's the top link. You can support content like this, and I will see you in the next one. That's your Daily BA.